Today, Kaylee is taking the minutes. Hello and welcome to Setting the Record Queer, a podcast where queer people talk about the pursuits and communities they love. This is Taking the Minutes, number 8, and it's about the NBC television series The Good Place. My name is Kaylee, my pronouns are she, her, and I am your only host. If you've never listened to the podcast before, Taking the Minutes is a little side thing we do once a month, where we just talk about something that either me or Alexis likes. This week it's my turn. I'm going to talk about a television show, because I liked it. This isn't going to be like a formal review or anything, so we're going to take our critic hats off, and we are going to put our enjoying hats on. If you've never seen the show, The Good Place, don't worry. For the first half of this, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to talk about why it's good. And then in the second half, I'm going to get a little more spoilery. So if you don't want to be spoiled, and you don't, please watch the show. I like it a lot. It means a lot to me. Then stick around, go away when I tell you to, and then come back in a month when you've watched the whole show. It's good. But anyway, The Good Place is a television show about a woman named Eleanor Shellstrop who dies and gets brought into the good place, but she's there by mistake. She was kind of a bad person on Earth. Not like the worst person, but pretty bad. And, she tries to improve herself as a person in order to stay there. And the show does take a lot of various turns throughout. The premise kind of shifts a lot as the show goes on. They take a lot of really cool turns with it. I really enjoy it. It's one of the funniest shows that I've seen ever. I think it's up there. One of my favorite shows to watch, period. I got really emotionally invested in all the characters. I just like it a lot, and I'm gonna say that a bunch this episode, because this is a little unstructured, but that's fine. The show primarily centers around practical applications and moral philosophy, and what that means, and what it means to be a good person, and how to be a good person, and what matters when being a good person, all while just being utterly hilarious. If you're hearing me say this and you're sitting there thinking okay, so it kind of touches on some light philosophical points and whatnot. No, it really goes deep in there, but in a way to someone like me who doesn't have a philosophy background at all, can understand it. And it goes pretty deep into these points, and it does a lot with analyzing them in a really cool way while never getting bogged down with them. Watch it. Please watch it. And, okay, this is the point where I'm going to start talking about the series as a whole, and please stop listening if you haven't watched the show. I know I've already said this 4 or 5 times, but go. I really like the way the show progresses from season to season. It starts out with a very this is gonna be the whole show sitcom-y format where Eleanor meets Chidi, who helps her learn to become a better person. And, one by one they establish the group of 4 main characters. We kind of learn a little bit, we have an episode where we learn a little bit more about Tahani, who lives right next to Eleanor and, plagued by insecurity and just kind of has all the moral shortcomings that come with the idea of billionaire philanthropy. And her character, I think, is a very interesting look into how someone like that could, think that they're doing a lot of good, but even so, really should not be in a position like that. And the fact that she is an indication that maybe she's not doing all that good. And then the next episode we meet Jason, who's also there by mistake. Jason, as it turns out, he's pretending to be a Buddhist monk, but he's actually just a Floridian DJ who did a lot of illegal things and is a very impulsive thinker. And at the end of the first season, we find out that, surprise, this was the bad place all along. And I think each of the 4 characters really does a good job representing, kind of 4 ways society can fail people. So we have Eleanor, she had these incredibly abusive parents growing up. Everyone around her just encourages her to do the worst thing all the time. She's been hurt a lot in the past, and as a result, she never really had much of a chance. Jason basically never got an education. He had no access to anything, and as a result, he just didn't have the resources to ever better himself. Tahani was in such this world of like intoxicating power with her also terrible parents, just constantly trying to get her and her sister to one up each other. And like, even though she came from the material resources to be able to do the right thing, she did not have the emotional ones. And then we have Chidi, who was written perfectly to be the ideal person who would be able to embody everything that's good. But even he's not really able to be this ideal person because he thinks so much about what's right and wrong and trying to do the right thing that it completely ruins his ability to actually enact what's right and just hurts everyone around him. And I really think they did a good job with those four characters kind of illustrating four extreme ways people just never had a shot in the first place. But the second season comes with an interesting thing where you think it's going to be like, at the end of the first season, Michael, the architect who's behind this whole afterlife neighborhood, erases everyone's memories and wants to start it up again. And after season 1, it seems like we're going to be entering season 2 on a note of, and here's like the secret, here's Eleanor having figured it out at the beginning this time, and they're going to secretly scheme. But they love going in an unexpected direction. So instead we wind up in a season where they reset the afterlife neighborhood dozens of times, and we get this season instead where the architect, Michael, has to learn to become a better person, despite not even being a person. And I think Michael serves as a very good kind of reflection on everything. His not human lets him kind of learn in different ways, and it kind of does a good job exploring kind of what it is to be human and where our morals come from in the first place, and how tied morality is to life and the fact that it's finite, and the fact that just even within this show, the moral impetus for characters to act good is because, their lives could end at any minute. They're in very precarious situations in a fake paradise that could come crashing down around them at any given point. With the third season, and a lot of people think that the third season is kind of the weakest one, and I would have to agree. I do like it, but it's just, it's a little slower. I tend to like the show a lot. I like all 4 seasons a lot, but in the third season, most of it takes place on Earth. The characters are brought back to the Earth to get a second chance at life. And see if they can improve as people, which would mean that the system that they're using to judge people, and whether they should go to the good or bad place, isn't functional. And that's kind of what we're left on with the third season's going to be. But again, a wrench gets thrown in the plans right away when Michael decides to tamper with things to try to guarantee a successful result. I think the big thing with the third season is that we get to look at the kind of like necessary just cycles of these things, the kind of learning by experience that is the foundation of the show, and just kind of how these failures are baked into learning to be better. And the fourth and final season, they basically repeat the experiment from the first season and get 4 new people in. Well, one of them's Chidi again, but we don't need to get into that. They get the 4 new people in. I really hope that you're not listening to this having seen the show, because first of all, I told you not to, but also this probably sounds like just complete nonsense to you. But anyway, that aside, the 4th season kind of comes to the conclusion that when you strip circumstances aside, pretty much anyone can improve, and I think it kind of makes a point about this whole like judging someone as good or bad is kind of impossible. It's a really good season, and I enjoy it quite a bit. The finale is what I really want to talk about. I watched that aired like 2 days ago from recording. I watched it with Alexis, and I cried from the start to the end the entire time. It was incredibly emotional, and I loved it a lot. And it did a very good job kind of dismantling this whole series' premise, this whole like eternal afterlife which kind of got brought to the end of nothing a human could do should result in eternal torture, but rather an eternal chance to improve yourself, and nothing a human has done, and no amount of paradise would be good forever. Human lives are meant to be finite. And God, it's just this really touching scene of watching everyone let go and live out the rest of their afterlives before moving on. And yeah, I hope you've been good. It's minus 50 good place points if you've listened to this whole thing without seeing the show, so, that's probably not great. But anyway, this has been Rewriting the Record. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble half coherently about this show. I don't regret it. If you didn't enjoy this one, you've already listened to it, and there's nothing you can do about that. Sucker. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/settingtherecordqueer. Patrons get early guest reveals, special Discord channel as early episodes, and a special thanks in the episode at certain tiers. Thank you to Jane at Procyon Ultra for supporting the show. And these Taking the Minutes are possible specifically thanks to y'all on Patreon. The only reason we're able to do these is because we can hire an editor for our normal episodes. If you liked this, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, leave a review, tell a friend, and recommend us on Twitter. All of those things help us immensely. If you've ever done that, or if you do that after hearing, thank you so much. It always makes me really, really happy when I see a positive review that pops up on iTunes, or when someone tweets at the account on Twitter. It always means a ton. If you would like to follow the podcast on Twitter, it's at strqueercast. If you'd like to send us an email, it's settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com. If you want to hang out in our community Discord, bit.ly/strqcord. If you're not in there, I recommend it. We hang out in there a bunch, and a bunch of our guests are in there, and you can send us feedback. It's probably the easiest way to ask questions for our guests. And if you think you should be on this podcast, or have a cool idea for who should be on this podcast, get in contact with us. We love the ideas. Our logo was made by Cubotic. That's at QBTIC on Twitter, or cobot.tumblr.com. Our theme music was by Thrill Me Music, who you can find at thrillmemusic.squarespace.com. Also, normally our editor, but only for the main episodes, not for these. You can find me on Twitter at witcheshex, or you can follow SoulSync's development at SoulSyncGame. That's SOULSYNC game. I hope you join us next week for our normal episode. We've already recorded it. We had Jess from Online on to talk about her synthwave music. It was great. Oh my gosh, y'all. Look forward to that one. Thank you all so much for listening. And yes, see you next week.